what I do want to move on to, and this is really important, is talking about some guidelines for you as angel investors starting out. Firstly, if you are new to venture and you're starting out, the first message I'm going to tell you is make sure that you have a full acceptance of the risk. Assume that whatever you invest in venture is going to go to zero. You need to be prepared to walk away. You cannot expect liquidity to get cash back until an exit event. Even if a company that you invested in, they get a seed stage funding, a Series A or Series B, and there's a valuation on these shares, you cannot assume that there is going to be a buyer. There could be, but you cannot assume so. Okay, so you need to go into this with eyes wide open and to be prepared that you need to be in it for the long game. Otherwise, don't get started. That's my advice. The second thing is take your time. When you're starting out, it might not feel like it because you don't really have your deal flow channels. You don't know how to evaluate companies, but really deal flow is limitless. Okay. The constraint for all of you as investors is capital. So get plenty of exposure, see lots of pitch decks, but be stingy with writing checks. Definitely one of the early mistakes I made when I started angel investing was that I was super excited and everything looked like a winner for me, right? And you think you're going to be amazing at this, but the reality is that probably not so much. So you definitely want to keep your early euphoria in check. And this is why I do the education for the community, because I want to help everyone understand what good looks like so that you can calibrate your bar before you even have to write a check. Thirdly, diversification matters. A lot of the companies that you invest in are going to go to zero. You might have one winning company out of every 10 or 20 startups that you invest in. So you need to be committed to building a portfolio. Now, that said, take your time with it. Again, going back to my point that capital is finite, don't be in a rush to write checks. You're in this for the long game. You can diversify by building a portfolio over a period of many years. And one of the things that we hear all the time in venture is that it's a game of power law, right? This is something that VCs say all the time. It is true, but I disagree with it. So I want to explain why I disagree with power law. Okay, so let me take a sidestep here and to explain this. If you ever hear this thing in venture capital where people say VC is a game of power law, this basically is a reframing of the 80-20 rule. So think about a bunch of companies that you invest in and how they perform in terms of returns. On the left, you have very few companies that return a really high multiple, and then you have a long tail that just don't return very much or outright go to zero. Okay, so visually, this is the concept of power law. I think that power law is aligned with the venture capital industry, but it's less relevant for angel investors. The implications are actually really different. So let me explain what I mean by this. Power law, again, is broadly true, but it's something that is aligned with venture capital because there's actually a lot of pressure points associated with running a VC fund. The first one is that if you think about the fund business model, that 2 and 20 model of management fees and carry, the incentives for a VC fund is to keep growing the fund size and to grow their AUM because it means more capital to deploy and more fees for them. Second, VC funds need to deploy funds very quickly. There's a lot of pressure. Once you say go, you got to start deploying. To give you a sense of the timing of this is that for a 10-year fund life, in years 1 to 3, the fund needs to invest in 20 to 30 portfolio companies. They spend year 5 to 7 watching and doubling down on the companies that are winners. And in year 10 onwards, they need to start returning liquidity or capital to investors. If you are maintaining a 100 to 1 selection rate, That basically means evaluating 2,000 to 3,000 startups in every year for the first 3 years. And that basically breaks down to evaluating 50 to 90 startups every single month. So if you think about the amount of work that needs to get done to do this, it's a lot. And if you want to ramp up your invest in more companies, the pressure even grows even more. Bear in mind also that a VC fund they're going to be severely constrained by the deal pipeline, the team bandwidth, and a fixed pool of expertise and knowledge, which is why I say with power law, there is a tension between diversification and skill, right? The more you want to deploy, the more you need the quality of the deals to slide. I'm going to skip this slide just because in the interest of time and to move on. So my next set of tips when we talk about portfolio construction and guidelines is that let's give you a reality check. Generally speaking, when you are starting out, the truism, you can expect that you're going to be low on skills and experience. Okay? Your pool of capital for venture is also fixed. It's not going to increase significantly in the near term. And your access to deal flow is actually pretty constrained, right? Because you're writing relatively small text. Next, you want to make small bets early because the psychology of investing changes once you stake capital. It is important to experience this. However, because your decision making is also porous when you're starting out, it makes sense to make undersized bets early to familiarize yourself to learn. And so being part of a syndicate is a way to improve your deal access, to learn for due diligence, to diversify with a smaller check. And next, you need to be playing for life-changing outcomes. Okay, the whole point of investing in venture is to get outsized returns, and we're talking about 10x, 20x, 50, or 100x your money. And so my argument here is that if you back the startup that returns 100x, and let's say you wrote a really small check, let's say $1,000, $1,000 with 100x return gives you $100,000. It's a little bit, so what? Right? It's a nice amount of money, but it's not life-changing. But on the other hand, if you invested $10,000 and you 100x into $1 million, now it's a much, much better outcome for you. On this topic of getting life-changing returns, I would say that you definitely want to get into this mindset. Some of the times I hear in venture capital when VCs will say, hey, angel investors, they don't need to make the same return as us as VCs. I disagree, right? Isn't it your right as angel investors that we invest even earlier than the VCs and we take on greater risk? Aren't we entitled to better returns? Like, why should we compromise? Okay, so get into this mindset. Really just don't take on all of this risk and compromise your returns. To put all of this in perspective, I'm going to give you some data to give you some perspective on what VC capital returns look like. Okay, what you're looking at here is VC capital returns from 2009 to 2018. If you look at this time period in the US, it's actually the great times in VC. This is when things were going well. And the data says that the average VC fund, they will deploy 50% of capital in this first bar here and into companies that return less than 1x. So it actually loses money. And 30% of the capital returns 1 to 3x, 9% returns 3 to 5x, and so on and so forth. Now, some of you will know that one of my better investments is a company that I invested in called Turing.com. I invested in their seed stage. Our expectation is that Turing is going to IPO next year, potentially, if the markets turn. So I invested at seed stage, wrote a personal check, and at the Series B, we had our syndicate. So I actually doubled down with another $500,000 check. And so when this company exits, if we get a full liquidity like we expect, this will be 100 or 200x multiplier. And that's like fantastic, right? It's a really great outcome. and it's a very big validation. I'm also realistic that if you chart that outcome on against these statistics, the probability of getting this unicorn 100x multiple return is 1 in 10,000 or more, right? It's so far off this chart. Actually, we can't really objectively say if I was lucky or there was some skill involved. So the purpose of showing you this data is to just give you some perspective of the probabilities of getting these kinds of returns and why you need to scrutinize your investments really hard, number one. And secondly, to make sure you diversify by investing into enough companies so you give yourself a chance to hit the outlier returns. And finally, wrapping up here on portfolio construction. My best advice, if you are starting out, and I would advise myself the same thing if I could rewind time, is that focus on investing in your skill as an investor. So learning diligence is something that takes many reps, a lot of time to develop. Start working on this early because this is going to carry you through in the long term. Next, be part of syndicates. I know I've said this multiple times, and I have my own syndicate. I'm not trying to drive you to my syndicate. There are others out there doing really good work. Let somebody else do the heavy lift for you. Okay. Let somebody else go out, find the deals, do the diligence on your behalf. You as an investor don't have to invest in any of these companies, and you get to learn from their diligence. So it's a way of shortcutting your learning process and de-risking. But beware that not every syndicate has high standards, so you want to pick and choose carefully. Final thing that I will say is think about your outcome levers. Okay, you have multiple ways to improve your odds of venture success. It isn't simply about how many deals you're investing in, how much capital that you're deploying. Okay, there are actually lots of different ways where you can affect the outcome. I'll give you a simple way, which is how you can scale on capital and to take carried interest. Going back to this data, which I showed you earlier, we looked at these VC capital return patterns. Let's say we performed like this and we were completely average to the VC venture capital industry. This data actually says that getting this 100x return multiplier is really off this chart. However, if you think about getting a 10x return, the probability of this is around 8%. So 8% is not huge. It's not a certainty, but it's not astronomically small either. We're talking about a 1 in 12 probability. Now, if you wrote a check as an angel investor and you get a 10x return, it's okay, it's nice. But think about the ability of a syndicate to scale capital. So as a syndicate, if I could write a $500,000 check, we 10x that into $5 million, and we take 20% carry, that's $1 million financial payout from a 10x return, right? So we get the same financial dollar payout from a 10x return as the unicorn probability with 100x. So this is an example of what I mean by thinking about other creative ways, such as the investment vehicle, to move the needle in your favor. Okay, so I'll just start to wrap up today's session and to leave a few minutes for questions. I want to talk about our contribution to venture with Angel School. We're really proud of our program approach, right? The way we want to help the community is in this 1, 2, 3 format. We have a couple of programs that we teach. The first one is Venture Fundamentals. This is essentially about giving you all essential venture skills in just 10 hours. This is the 10 hours I wish I had when I started 8 years ago before I started writing checks. The other program we have is our Syndicate Blueprint. In this program, we help angel investors who want to scale up, run their own angel networks, and to do syndicated deals like I do. We teach that. Anyone who goes through our program gets a seat on our investment committee. So the reason that we created this investment committee structure is that we give you the ability to get hands-on deal experience and to build your track record. As part of being on the IC, you get enrolled in our carry sharing program. So every deal that Angel School does, you are entitled to a slice of the upside. And by the way, being part of the investment committee is about giving you exposure and experience. There is zero expectation to invest. So we want to give you the education and also to give you a way to learn. And you can learn without risking your own capital until you're ready. Okay, so that is our philosophy. And finally, when you're ready, you can take off, which means investing on your own. And for those of you that want to run your own angel networks, you can launch your own syndicate. And we're really proud of the impact that we're making at this point as a bootstrap organization. We've impacted 200 to 300 investors from 30 different countries. These are some of the people in our community. We're really lucky and proud to work with them. So some and really smart and professional people and known experts in their fields. And if you want to be part of this, I'm really looking forward to having you.